Have you ever felt unworthy of something greater in life? Perhaps you've thought, I'm not good enough, or I'm too flawed to make a difference. If so, you're not alone. Many of us wrestle with feelings of inadequacy, believing our imperfections disqualify us from achieving our purpose. But what if I told you the opposite is true? What if your imperfections are precisely what make you the perfect candidate for the extraordinary work God has in store for you? This may sound like a contradiction. You are imperfect. You are a perfect candidate. At first glance, it seems illogical, but it's not. Let's look at Timothy, a young leader in the Bible, to understand this paradox and uncover how God's power can work through our weaknesses. Timothy's story, youth and doubt. Timothy wasn't a flawless individual. He struggled with insecurities, particularly about his youth. Paul, his mentor, wrote to him in 1 Timothy 4:12, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." Why did Paul feel the need to say this? Because Timothy had a tendency to doubt himself. As a young leader, he likely faced skepticism from others who questioned his authority or maturity. But the real challenge wasn't just external criticism. It was the internal voice that echoed, "You're too young. You're not ready." Paul's words were a call to silence that voice and remind Timothy that leadership isn't about age. It's about character and faith. How often do we let self-doubt hold us back? We tell ourselves we're too inexperienced, too young, or too unqualified. Timothy's story teaches us that what matters isn't how others perceive us, or even how we perceive ourselves. It's how God sees us, and He sees potential even in our imperfections. A fragile body, yet a strong calling. Timothy didn't just struggle with self-esteem, he also battled physical weakness. In 1 Timothy 5:23, Paul advised him, "Stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses." Timothy's health wasn't ideal. He suffered from recurring ailments, which must have been discouraging for someone tasked with such significant responsibilities. Imagine leading a community while dealing with constant physical discomfort. It's enough to make anyone question their ability to keep going. But here's the powerful truth. Timothy's physical struggles didn't disqualify him from God's work. If anything, they showcased how God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. You are made perfect in God's eyes. Feeling imperfect is a universal experience. We all have moments of doubt where we wonder if we're enough. But God's perspective is different from ours. In Hebrews 10:14, we're reminded, "For by one sacrifice He has made perfect forever those who are being made holy." Think about that for a moment. You may feel flawed, but in God's eyes, you've already been made perfect through Christ's sacrifice. This doesn't mean you're free from mistakes or struggles. It means that your imperfections are covered by God's grace. Timothy's story shows us that God doesn't choose people based on worldly standards of perfection. Instead, He chooses those who are willing to step forward despite their flaws. As long as you're available, as Timothy was, God can use you to accomplish incredible things. Competence comes from God. Finally, consider 2 Corinthians chapter 3, 4-5, where Paul writes, "Such confidence we have through Christ before God. Not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God." Timothy's competence didn't come from his own abilities, and neither does ours. It comes from God, who equips us for every task He calls us to. You don't need to have all the answers or possess every skill. What matters is your willingness to rely on God's strength rather than your own. The takeaway: your imperfections are your strength. So where does this leave us? Timothy's story is a powerful reminder that our imperfections don't disqualify us. They qualify us. God isn't looking for perfection, He's looking for availability. You may feel too young, too weak, or too flawed, but those very traits make you a perfect candidate for God's work. Why? Because when you step forward despite your weaknesses, you allow God's power to shine through. As you go about your day, remember this: God has already made you complete in His eyes. Your imperfections are not obstacles, they're opportunities for His grace to be revealed. Trust in His plan, and watch how He transforms your doubts into confidence and your weaknesses into strength. See you in the next lesson, where we'll continue uncovering the beauty of God's work in our lives.